Hey guys, today instead of doing a lesson, I'm going to actually do a lecture. But stay around, it's an interesting one, and especially if you're new at programming, you might find this extremely helpful. What I'm going to label this lecture is Stop Coding. So when you're starting out with Java, there's a tendency to want to dive straight into code. It's new, it's fun, and when you get it right, there is instant reward from seeing the correct result or something neat appear on the screen. Furthermore, while you're in a class or following a book, it often works because you're being told what to do and learning at a pace that you can handle. But the fact is that starting to code straight away is a bad habit, and one you need to break as fast as you possibly can. So here's a few simple rules. One, you will never solve a problem in Java unless you can describe it in your native language, like English. And two, when describing a solution, there are two main things to consider: what needs to be done and how you're going to do it. And of the two, what is much more important than how, especially early on in the process. Unfortunately, most beginners are far more interested in the latter because their minds are already racing ahead to Java code, and code is all about how. So, three, when you run into problems, stop coding. My advice usually includes switch off your computer, get a pencil and paper, and write down what you're trying to do for a second or third or fourth time if necessary. Draw diagrams, think of scenarios, especially ones that might make your program fail. Any fool can write a program that works when everything is fine. A good programmer writes one that handles the situations when they aren't. When you finish that last step, turn your computer back on, take another look at your code. Quite often you'll find that it's complete rubbish and you have to start again. And you know what? That's alright, because now you're really designing. And with practice, it will happen less and less frequently. Four, when you're writing code, don't write more than 10 lines without compiling. Um, Even experienced programmers follow this rule, and sometimes they even compile, after a few lines of code, just because it can be extremely difficult to untangle all the compiler errors that you get, especially if you do more than 10 lines of code. You might have multiple errors. Um, Programming is thinking, not coding. And the sooner you learn to think before you code, the sooner you will stop coding yourself into a corner. Honestly, the average professional programmer spends roughly about 20% of his or her time actually coding. The rest is spent thinking, writing, and documenting what they've done. So if you find yourself spending a lot more time in front of your IDE program or source editor or whatever, chances are you're doing it wrong. So I hope this is a little bit about into how you should code, how you should begin your process of coding, which is actually not by coding at all. It's actually by figuring out what your problem is. This is a short lecture. I'm going to go into a little bit longer lecture on my next video. It'll elaborate more on this lecture. Thanks.